Hey guys, welcome to Drinking with Dave. Today we're going to be doing a comparison video, which means instead of taking one drink and comparing it to classical music, like we do in most of our videos, we'll actually be comparing different types of whiskey. And in this case, we'll be comparing 4 different types of Glenmorangie and determining which is best. So this is actually the first Highlands entry in the series, unless you count Speyside Scotches, which Speyside is its own region for Scotch, but technically also part of the Scottish Highlands. But discounting Speyside, if you just take the traditionally defined Highlands region of Scotch, this is probably the most popular distillery. The 4 we'll be comparing today are the original, which is a 10-year, the Lasanta, the Quinta Ruban, and the Nectar D'Or. And the reason Glenmorangie makes an ideal candidate to do this type of video and comparison is because each one of these has a different finish. The original has a bourbon cask finish, the Lasanta as a sherry cask finish, the Quinta Ruban as a port cask finish, and the Nectar D'Or as a Sauternes cask finish, which is a type of French wine from the Bordeaux region. This means you can get a good feel for how different types of casks will influence a whiskey, all within one singular brand. Now, as for my personal experience with these, I have never had the Nectar D'Or, but I am quite familiar with the other 3, and just based on prior experience, I would say my favorite is the Quinta Ruban. However, I have never had them in a direct comparison side by side like this either. But personally, I tend to gravitate toward the port cask finish, which is kind of surprising because I don't like port. It's just too sweet for me. However, what I've discovered over the years is that simply having the influence of port in something not traditionally associated with that type of sweetness adds a really nice component that helps round out the whiskey. With that said, let's go ahead and jump right in and look at the specs. So jumping into the specs here, first the original. This one has been aged for 10 years. It has a bourbon cask finish with American white oak sourced from the Ozark Mountains. It comes in at 40% ABV, and it is chill filtered, but at least is non-colored. Next, the Lasanta. This one has been aged for 12 years, has a sherry cask finish, clocks in at 43% ABV, but it's both chill filtered and colored. And the Quinta Ruban has been aged for 14 years. This has a port cask finish. It also clocks in at 46% ABV, and it's both non-chill filtered and non-colored. So far, this one has the best specs out of the 3. And the Nectar D'Or kind of matches the Quinta Ruban in terms of specs. It doesn't have an age statement, which usually just means there's some kind of mix in there. But it also clocks in at 46% ABV. It's both non-chill filtered and non-colored, and also has been finished in a Sauternes cask finish. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump in and see what's on the nose. We'll start with the original. This one's light, it's floral. There's some nice citrus tones coming in through the oak. Some fruit on this one. I'm picking up a lot of orange mixed with some lemon. Also getting some peaches, apricots, and raisin. All right, on to the Lasanta. Oh, this one has a really nice nose. The nose is much better than the first one. Getting those sweeter sherry notes come through, a lot of fruitiness, more so than the first one, which is very characteristic of sherry. I'm getting some plums coming in. Those raisin notes are there as well, but they're a little bit more prevalent on this one than they were the last one. There is a bit of a sweeter element in there. Yeah, I'm getting some honey and chocolate notes mixing in as well. On to the Quinta Ruban. This one is the darkest in color with almost a rosé color. It has a sweeter nose. The chocolate notes are more prevalent on this one, but it's a little bit different than the last one. It's more like a dark chocolate with toffee. The fruit notes are quite different as well. Yeah, I'm getting some like rich blackberries, raspberries, maybe a little bit of nectarine, some cherries coming in there as well. It's really nice. And finally, the Nectar D'Or. Okay, this one has a radically different profile than the other three. There's like a pastry note in there that you don't really get on any of the others. It has sort of a tart, citrusy sweetness. It's kind of like lemon squares. You know, I'm getting some lemon, some lime, vanilla. Actually, it might have some of the same notes as the first one as well. A little bit, yeah, getting some like peaches and apricots, almost like an apricot strudel. All right, let's go back through and have a taste. I do have some water over here, so I will be cleansing my palate in between each one and taking a break. Starting with the original. This one's light. It's an easy sipper. On the palate, I'm getting that bourbon cask influence, picking up a little bit of, you know, caramel, vanilla, oak, spice, the typical notes that you would expect more from a bourbon. But there's also a little bit of nuttiness in there that I didn't really pick up on the nose. I'm getting raisins on this one pretty strong, but that's not surprising, to be honest. I pick up raisins on just about every mainland Scotch. I'm not really sure what that is. I don't get it on Islays. I don't get it on any other island Scotch. But I don't care if it's Highlands, if it's a Lowlands, if it's a non-peated option. Usually after the first sip, I'm like, raisins. But let's try to peel beyond that and see what else we can get here. On the finish, I'm getting some of the same notes I got on the nose. The oranges are really starting to come through more now. Also getting some peaches, apricots. There's a dry element in there, maybe like just a little bit of cinnamon too. All right, let's move on to the Lasanta. This is the sherry cask finish. No surprise, I'm picking up raisins again. Also getting those sherry notes coming through as well. A little bit of spice on the back, fruit on the front. Very characteristic of sherry. But then I'm also getting like a creamy element in there, maybe like a butterscotch. It's kind of mixing in with chocolate. Picking up some fruit, dates, honey, and it resonates on the palate just a little bit longer than the 10-year. It's got a longer finish. All right, on to the Quinta Ruban. This is the port cask finish. This one is nice. Yeah, it's a little sweeter, but not too sweet. And I'm kind of strange with scotches because I actually prefer smokier scotches. But if I'm going to go with a non-peated option, adding a little bit of sweetness just really adds a complexity that helps round it out. It matches the nose really well too. It's light, but it's rich at the same time. You get some rich plums, blackberries, raspberries, and it does have that same orange that the other two have, but it's a little bit different. It's more like a dark chocolate covered orange. Let's see what else we can find here. There's a little bit of spice on the finish. You almost get some black pepper. The fruit notes you get on the front develop into more wood tones on the back. This is probably the woodsiest of the three that we've had so far. But I like the finish, you know, it's well balanced. It develops really nicely. It's still light, but the flavors are more intense. This is actually a really good one to pair with cigars. And finally, on to the Nectar D'Or. This is the only one I've not had before, so I'm excited about this. That one's pleasant, quite pleasant. There's a good balance here between the sweetness and the spiciness. A little bit longer finish too. I'm getting some buttery pastry notes, which I didn't really pick up on the other three. Also getting some lemon notes come in there. There's a bit of a zing that I can't quite. Maybe that's gingerbread actually. Might be picking up some gingerbread as well. Getting a little bit of nuttiness too. Ooh, actually, you know what this reminds me of? Baklava. I know that's so random and obscure for a whiskey, but you get some, like a nice mix of pastry and spice, nuttiness with a little bit of honey and syrup. Yeah, it reminds me of baklava. And now that I've got that in my head, I'm not going to be able to think of anything else. I like it even more now. That's really good. Okay. Well, let's move on to some final thoughts. So if I'm comparing all four of these, they're all on the lighter side of the spectrum. And while I didn't mention it each time, I did pick up raisins on all four of these. I actually did pick up a little bit of orange on all of them as well. And that's probably just more characteristic of the Glenmorangie brand. I think the Lasanta is probably my least favorite of the four. The original is more in line with what you would expect from a traditional Highland Scotch, but at 40% is a little bit on the light side. The Nectar D'Or really surprised me and has a flavor profile that can stand out on its own. But at the end of the day, I'm going back to that port cask finish. I like the Quinta Ruban. I think this is my favorite. It's got a well-rounded complexity and richness of flavor. So anyway, let me know which one is your favorite. I would love to hear from you in the comments. This is the second comparison video that I've done, and while it veers away from my typical format, I'm definitely open to doing more of these. So thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for future videos. Take care.